I myself, my team and the organization I'm working in, are we sufficiently equipped to have the right dialogues with around sustainability with our key stakeholders, patient organization, payers, healthcare systems, and so on, both that as the requirement today, but also that will become the requirement tomorrow. And so one, are we able to have those dialogues at a sufficient level? And two, can we meaningfully and relatively efficient provide the data that's being asked for in the tenders, which is another one. But the literacy and having those dialogues is also what moves you from being reactive, so only looking at, oh, there's a new requirement in the tender. Do we fulfill it? Do we not? Are we good? Are we bad? To being proactive in the market, to actually saying, okay, so in this part of our product portfolio, we have a super low CO2 footprint, or we're not using a lot of water, or we can actually reuse where the others are single use, whatever it might be. Let's go in and shape the market around that. Let's go in and shape the tender criteria around that.
Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. This is the show where we talk about decarbonizing the healthcare sector by interviewing experts about tools, tricks, tactics, and strategies for decarbonizing the healthcare sector. It's made by us in Green Innovation Group. We are a management consultancy that are dedicated to decarbonizing the healthcare sector. We do that by providing strategic advisory to different pharma and medtech clients, and sometimes also to the public sector, the healthcare providers, or the systems at large. So, in this episode, the reason why you should listen to this is because I have Joachim with me in the studio, and Joachim has been diving very deeply into people and talent, one of the areas that we're investigating in Green Innovation Group, and he's been looking at the educational situation for sustainability amongst commercial organizations. And there's quite a few very interesting insights that come out of that investigation, that analysis. But without further ado, Joachim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here, and good to be here as a guest as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a lot of fun to interview you. And in recent time, you have been diving quite deep on education, and particularly looking into the requirements in order to act and to be relevant in the market for commercial organizations regarding sustainability and the developments that are going on in the sustainability stage. So maybe you can start off by introducing the overall picture that you see after having worked closely with it for a while.
So the reason that we are talking about this, I'm talking about this, is that it's a problem that we see with our clients, especially in the European market. So if we take completely and zoom out and look at where are the pharma and medtech companies today in regards to sustainability, most of them are pretty well on track at a corporate level to being science-based target aligned and have reduction plans and have a chief sustainability officer and are working with this in a strategic and systematic way. When it comes to capabilities and competencies, they're staffing up, and there's a lot of very smart people being hired at the headquarter level. But if we look at the way that most local country offices are organized, they are organized as sort of satellite sales and market access offices that are there to work with the local market, create the right partnerships, win some tenders, and secure good pricing from the payers, and so on. And especially in a Northern European context, it's a new commercial reality that sustainability is a part of that conversation. It's that you're having with the healthcare systems and the payers. And it's also coming more and more into specific tender requirements. And quite simply, most of the local countries in pharma and medtech are not equipped to have these conversations and work with these tenders in a serious way.
So before you would have something like safety of the treatment, efficiency of the treatment, cost of the treatment that you would have to be very well versed in if you're working in a commercial organization. And now all of a sudden you have to be able to answer questions about sustainability, everything.
Yeah.
So what kind of questions could you get in a commercial reality? Let's say that you're a commercial person working with a device company, going to a practitioner. What are the new questions? What's the new ask?
So I think it's important to say that this standard price quality split is by far the main criteria and the predominance of what matters in procurement. But that being said, we are seeing more and more requirements around packaging, around chemicals, also CO2 footprints, some asking for LCAs, and I think many of our listeners will be aware of how systematic that's coming out in the UK with the NHS, but it's also the factor in all the Nordic markets, and it's also very fragmented. So each market will be asking for different things in different ways, and the dialogue also works at different levels, whether you are a market access person, whether you're working with the regulatory parts, or whether you're specifically working with tenders or contracts. And what usually happens is that at the moment is that the local organizations, they will, when these kind of dialogues come up, they will usually just not have them. They will deflect from them.
Do not have the answers on or the dialogues.
Also just not take the dialogues, at least not take them proactively and go in and engage and so on. And if you look at what's available in terms of training, capacity building, and knowledge from corporate level, most companies will have some kind of training awareness program. Basically, hey, we are a big pharma or medtech corp. This is our strategy. This is how we impact the world. But at a very, very high level, very, very basic stuff that is not specific for the market that you're operating in and not specific for the role that you're operating in, thereby not equipping you to be knowledgeable enough to have the dialogue, but also know where you need to ask for help where. Now we're bridging a bit more over to putting sustainability into your operational model and making sure that you have the processes, know where to get the data and so on. But a foundation for all that, for knowing what to ask your own sustainability experts or product experts about so on, is having that foundational knowledge.
So you need a certain level of sustainability literacy in order to be able to ask the right questions.
Yes.
In the NHS, we have seen that they're rolling out the carbon literacy project that comes out of a Manchester-based NGO, where basically all staff in NHS can sign up for free. And my guess would be that a lot of NHS suppliers are going to sign up for this course with this organization called Carbon Literacy. But your point is also that carbon literacy might actually end up being a shortcoming if you are in a local context like, say, Finland, where there's a large focus. They have a big forestry industry, so they produce a lot of paper, and they're also investing quite heavily into recycling technologies for the circular economy in terms of paper recycling and alternative materials. So you could imagine that the tender requirements that would develop in the Finnish economy would be very different from the tender requirements that would develop in, for instance, a Danish economy or a Swiss economy or a Spanish economy. So this kind of speaks into that particularly national grounded sustainability knowledge. So what is the question that you should ask yourself if you are in a commercial organization in order to equip yourself and be adaptable for the future?
Am I myself, my team and the organization I'm working in, are we sufficiently equipped to have the right dialogues with around sustainability with our key stakeholders, patient organization, payers, healthcare systems, and so on. Both that is the requirement today, but also that will become the requirement tomorrow. And so one, are we able to have those dialogues at a sufficient level? And two, can we meaningfully and relatively efficient provide the data that's being asked for in the tenders, which is another one. But the literacy and having those dialogues is also what moves you from being reactive, so only looking at, oh, there's a new requirement in the tender. Do we fulfill it? Do we not? Are we good? Are we bad? To being proactive in the market, to actually saying, okay, so in this part of our product portfolio, we have a super low CO2 footprint, or we're not using a lot of water, or we can actually reuse where the others are single use, whatever it might be. Let's go in and shape the market around that. Let's go in and shape the tender criteria around that. Most companies are still reactive, but we are seeing some companies going hard in and really taking advantage of this, trying to shape the market in their direction, because these sustainability requirements are coming, and they're still coming quite sporadic and ununified. The NHS being the exception, where you have a large market with relatively uniform requirements and a sort of more planned strategy. But for many other markets, it's still really individuals who are saying, oh, I think paper is really important. I want this to be part of that. Of course, you also have stuff like the Nordic Packaging Initiative, which creates some sort of guidelines. And I think this should be a quite natural playing field for pharma and medtech companies to go into, because you're used to working closely with your customers and trying to shape them as much as you can, or shape the environment before the tenders are coming up. So a very the way that we work with this with our clients is that we bring in a structure and which it's adapted, but we have a system where we say, okay, everybody in this local country organization, they need to have a basic awareness. Sometimes we bring that in. Sometimes they will go through a training program from the mother corporate organization. Then we target out the specific groups. These are the tender folks, the contract folks, market access, and so on. They need to know this and this and this. Usually, we have a pretty good knowledge around that is for the various markets. But you can also, when you start having this dialogue, it pops up. Oh yeah, actually I got asked about this in this sales process, and we didn't really have an answer. Which brings me to the next key point is that one thing is knowing what to know in each role and which capabilities are needed. But it's just as important to know what you shouldn't try and answer yourself when you call in an expert, a sustainability expert or product expert. You should not try to jam up an LCA. It's for your product or something like that. Just as you would in any other requirements around product, whether it's sterilization or a documented patient outcome or whatever it might be, you find that expert within your own field. But a lot of times, that internal expert in the large organization or those experts, they're not really established those processes. It's a bit of a different episode, but the literacy and the sustainability capabilities, they can't be there all the time because they're specialists who will sit in a regional team or at headquarters. So you need to know when to pull them in and when not to. And that means that you actually need more than a basic level in order to know when to call them.
You need to have an understanding of what great looks like. And then, as you said, asking the question, is my organization well enough equipped to be conversational on this area? Yes or no? It's probably no, because it's an emerging field. It's in its infancy. It just means that very few are well equipped at this current point in time.
2-3 years ago, it didn't matter. Now it matters.
The other thing that we might ask is, can we really afford to not be a market leader and a market shaper on this agenda? Are we willing to put at risk our portfolio because someone else is probably going to claim that space and be that market leader and that market shaper if we're not moving into that agenda? Is that a fair representation of what's at stake in this problem?
Yeah. And that's the background of why even bother investing in this area in your organization around sustainability, building competencies and capabilities. That is exactly because that we're seeing a third player entering in that pricing and quality, which is sustainability. In the harshest of cases, it's a binary go, no go. If you cannot fulfill this requirement, or you have this chemical in that we don't want, you just cannot submit a bid for that tender. That's the extreme case. Usually that's not happening. Then you have cases, then you have like the next level where it's part of the scoring, like we're seeing in NHS, which is also quite severe, because if you don't get those points, then some of your competitors might do, and then you need to pull those points in a different place. And your quality is usually what your quality is. The R&D cycles of that is too long for a specific tender. So that only leaves price left of where you can, and that, so you would have to lower your price, thereby lowering your margins. Nobody wants that. So there's a very real business case for being good in this area. And then there's, of course, the softer and softer version of what tender requirements could look like, even to non-mandatory requirements, which is what it used to be for some things that we're just kind of looking at it. It's just like background information, but it's definitely being turned up to the harder requirements. That's the process that we're seeing, but from a very low base.
Yeah, so we're still early in the uptake.
You're still very early. It's super early. It's and I think that's part of the problem for a lot of the organizations and for directing resources to this place, is that you take this to your EMEA sales leader or whoever, or down to headquarters, and they'll be like, how many tenders have we lost? Probably you haven't lost any or one, or but the change is just happening so fast that if you just look back at what has been and use that as your guidance, that's a very poor guidance for what's actually going to happen, because it changes super fast. And the reason why it changes is that more and more healthcare systems, everybody in the Nordics and the UK, have set quantifiable sustainability targets, CO2 reductions and everything. And the only real place that can come from is from the suppliers. I mean, sure, some optimization stuff will happen in the hospitals. They'll buy some green energy and whatnot. But we just look at where the footprint coming from. It is from the suppliers. It's from the consumption. So the only way to really achieve that goal for the healthcare systems of becoming sustainable is to put pressure on the suppliers.
And that is why you need to be conversational on sustainability in your commercial organization. Yes, exactly. I think that was a perfect wrap up. Thanks a lot, Joachim, for coming on to the show and sharing your insights from the work that you're doing right now to talk to experts in commercial and learn about their realities, figuring out what are the key asks and challenges. I think it's really fascinating to get under the skin of that. So thanks a lot for being here.
My pleasure.
Thanks to you, dear listeners, for listening in to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. We really appreciate it when you share the show, when you subscribe to the show, when you like the show, when we share it and comment on it. Last year, we were amongst the top 5% most shared shows on Spotify. So hopefully we will be that again in 2023. Thanks a lot for sharing, and thanks a lot for subscribing. We really appreciate you listening and giving us feedback. Cheers.